The mill of Grevenholt stood at the bend of the river, its crooked timbers leaning like an old drunk who refused to fall. The wheel turned slow and heavy, churning the gray water with a rhythm that seemed too sluggish for the grinding it performed. Folk in the village often said that Grevenholt's millstone had never dulled, never cracked, not once in its long years. While other mills needed repairs and new stones brought from distant quarries, the stone beneath Grevenholt turned as sharp as the day it was cut. The villagers whispered about it when they thought no one listened, for too many mouths had ground their flour there for too many generations to ignore that something about that stone was not natural. It was said that long ago, when the first miller built the place, he unearthed a hollow beneath the ground, an ancient cavern whose walls dripped with dark moss and where no birds sang near. And when he tried to fill it, shoveling earth and rock into the black, the pit spat it all back up as though the earth itself refused to be covered. That first miller, desperate for his trade, did not speak of it to the others. He set his wheel and his stone, and though it stood upon a hollow, the mill worked better than any in the valley. Yet there were stories. Goats that wandered near the mill were found with their bellies split open. Dogs that sniffed too close limped home without their tails. And sometimes, on nights when the river mist was thick, shapes moved beneath the slats of the floor, too small to be men, too quick to be beasts. The first miller lived and died there, and so too his son, and his son after him, until at last old Torbrand came to be master of the wheel. Torbrand was a dour man with shoulders bent from hauling sacks of grain. His beard yellowed with flour, dust, and years. He lived in the mill house with his daughter, Else, a girl of 16 whose hair was as pale as milk and whose eyes carried the dull gray of the river. Her mother was long dead, buried in a churchyard stone, and Torbrand raised the girl with as much love as a man like him could manage, which was not much. She was quiet, obedient, and knew her place in the business of grinding grain. The villagers brought their harvest to Torbrand, and his mill gave them flour white and fine, never tasting of grit, never clogging the oven's heat. They paid him well but never lingered long, for the mill made them uneasy. At night, when the wheel slowed and the building creaked, strange noises rattled up from the stone. Scratching, dragging, and once, so Else swore, laughter, as if many voices whispered together just beneath the floorboards. "Pay it no heed," Torbrand would mutter, his eyes narrowing. "A mill is a house of echoes, rats and wind, nothing more." But Else had seen things. When she was a child, she had crept down to the grinding room in the dark and pressed her ear to the stone. It thrummed like a heart, pulsing, and when she pulled back she found a smear of blood on her cheek, though she had cut herself on nothing. She said nothing to her father, but that night she dreamed of little gray hands reaching from cracks in the stone, claws tipped with black nails, beckoning her down. One autumn, when the harvest was heavier than most, a boy from the village went missing. His name was Jarn, a shepherd's son, only 12, with hair the color of straw and a laugh that carried across the fields. He vanished near the river, last seen leading a lame ewe toward the water. The village scoured the banks, the fields, even the woods, but found only the ewe, its belly gnawed open, entrails steaming, though no wolf tracks marked the ground. Else remembered hearing the stone grind that night, though her father had sworn he slept. She thought she heard voices, muffled but joyous, as though the mill itself had joined in some feast. Winter came cold and hard, and with it the villagers grew restless. Grain ran thin, and more than once someone muttered that Torbrand's mill ground too well, that flour so fine must come at a price. When a second child disappeared, this time a girl named Brynja, who vanished on her way to fetch water, murmurs turned to accusations. Torbrand spat at them, his broad hand gripping his axe handle. "You'll not lay your dead at my door. My mill feeds you. My will turns so your bread may rise. The priest, Father Clemens, was not so sure. He had grown wary of the place for years, and more than once he'd asked to consecrate the mill, to bless its stone. Torbrand always refused. But now, with children missing, Clemens pressed harder. What lies beneath your floor, Torbrand? Why do you keep the stone unblessed? Torbrand's face darkened. A man does not let others meddle with his livelihood. What's beneath is earth and stone, as God made it. But Else saw the way her father's hands shook, the sweat beading on his brow, and she knew there was more to his silence. One night, Else woke to the sound of her father leaving his bed. She crept after him, barefoot, and watched as he descended the grinding room stairs. A lantern swung in his hand, casting long shadows. She hid at the railing, heart pounding, as he laid the lantern near the great millstone. He knelt and pressed his hand flat upon it. For a moment nothing happened. Then, slow, deliberate, the stone shuddered, and a hairline crack split down its center. From the black seam came a smell like wet iron, and a sound, scrabbling claws, wheezing breaths, eager and many. Torbrand spoke in a low, harsh whisper. You have had enough for this season. Be silent now. The reply came not in words but in laughter, a chorus of chittering, high-pitched and cruel. Fingers, gray and wiry, pushed from the crack, scrabbling at the surface. Else nearly screamed but clamped her hand to her mouth. Torbrand struck the stone hard with his fist. No more, he barked. The villagers are restless. They look to me. You'll wait. The hands retreated, the laughter dimmed, and the crack sealed shut as though it had never been. The stone was whole again, humming faintly. Torbrand gathered his lantern and trudged upstairs, never knowing his daughter had seen. Else could not sleep that night. She lay trembling, her mind filled with the sight of those hands, those claws. She understood now what the villagers whispered. The mill stone ground fine because it was fed more than grain. It was fed flesh. Days turned to weeks, and though no more children vanished, the air in the village was heavy with fear. Folk crossed themselves when they passed the mill. Some began to speak of burning it down, but always they remembered the flour, how it kept them through winters when others starved. They grumbled, but they brought their grain still. Else avoided the grinding room when she could, but one evening she heard it again. The stone turning though no sacks were brought, the wheel clattering though the river ran low. Against her will she crept to the door, pressed her eye to the crack, and saw the stone dripping wet with blood. No grain fed it, yet it turned, and the floor around it shivered with motion, as if 100 small bodies writhed beneath the planks. She fled before she saw more. The truth weighed on her until at last she confessed it to Father Clemens. She told him everything. The night she saw her father bargain, the hands reaching up, the laughter. Clemens paled, but his eyes burned with righteous fury. This is foulness, child. The evil one works here. It must be ended. He gathered men from the village, strong with pitchforks and torches, and came to the mill at midnight. Else followed, though her heart quailed, for she knew her father was inside. They burst through the doors, shouting, demanding Torbrand yield the stone to holy fire. Torbrand stood before them, axe in hand, his face twisted with rage. You fools, he bellowed. You burn this mill and you burn your own bread. Do you want famine? Do you want to starve while the snow lies thick? This stone is life. But Clemens cried back, it is death, Torbrand. You fed it blood, and it cries for more. Yield or be damned. The villagers surged forward. Torbrand swung his axe, striking one man down, and for a moment it seemed blood would flow between neighbors. But then the millstone cracked open of its own accord. The sound split the air like thunder. The stone gaped wide, and from its heart poured a tide of creatures. Goblins, gray and hunched, their eyes like coals, their teeth long and black. They swarmed up from the crack, dozens, scores, shrieking in glee. They leapt upon the villagers, tearing, biting, ripping. Flesh sprayed, bones cracked. Torches fell and died in the rush of bodies. Else screamed, clutching the doorway, as chaos filled the grinding room. Father Clemens raised his crucifix, shouting prayers, but the goblins hissed and leapt upon him, dragging him down. Torbrand swung his axe, cleaving one, then two, but for each he struck, 5 more clambered up. The wheel outside turned madly, faster than the river should allow, splashing water high as if driven by the feast within. The goblins' laughter filled the rafters, a cacophony of delight, and the stone drank deep of the blood that soaked the floor. Else fled. She ran into the night, the screams of her father and the villagers chasing her into the fields. Behind her, the mill glowed with a sickly red, light leaking through its slats as though a fire burned within, though no smoke rose. The wheel spun faster and faster until it was a blur. She did not stop running until she reached the church, where she locked herself in and hid beneath the altar until dawn. When at last she crept out, trembling, the village was silent. She dared return to the mill, though terror clawed at her. She found the door standing open, the wheel stilled. Inside, silence lay heavy. Blood stained the floor, but no bodies remained. Only the stone, whole once more, gleamed wet as if newly washed. Her father was gone. The villagers were gone. Only the stone remained. Else fled that place forever. But the mill did not stay empty. New folk came, strangers who asked no questions, who ground their grain there as if nothing had happened. The wheel turned, the flour poured fine, and the stone never dulled. But on mist-heavy nights, when the river runs gray and the wind carries faint laughter, those who live near swear they hear scratching beneath the mill, and the sound of many teeth grinding, always grinding on more than grain.